Fascism, political ideology, and mass movement that dominated many parts of Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe between 1919 and 1945. And that also had adherents in Western Europe, the United States, South Africa, Japan, Latin America, and the Middle East. Europe's first fascist leader, Benito Mussolini, took the name of his party from the Latin word fascistus, which refers to a bundle of elm or birch rods, usually containing an axe, used as a symbol for penal authority in ancient Rome. Although fascist parties and movements differ significantly from one another, they had many characteristics in common, including extreme militaristic nationalism, contempt for electoral democracy, in a political and cultural liberalism, a belief in natural social hierarchy and the rule of elites, and the desire to create the Volksgemeinschaft, which is the people's community, in which individual interest would be subordinate to the good of the nation. At the end of World War II, the major European fascist parties were broken up, and in some countries they were officially banned. Beginning in the late 1940s, however, many fascist-oriented parties and movements were founded in Europe as well as in Latin America and South America, although some European neo-fascist groups attracted large followings, especially in Italy and France. None were influential as the major fascist parties of the interwar period. Welcome, folks. This is All Minus One. Hey, please hit that like button, share, subscribe. If you see right here on my little speed dial, my Opera, I have a link to YouTube, DLive, my locals, Rumble, all that. And just know that I'm on there. This YouTube is the Ins Justify the Memes, the live show that I do. Same as DLive. The locals is All Minus One. This channel, you can go there. I will upload directly to there. So if I ever get purged from YouTube, there will be things there, and Rumble as well. So let's get into the topic. Today, we're going to talk definitions. I want to speak to you about defining terminology and understanding, having a basic understanding of where you stand or other people stand politically. Because there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of complication of these ideologies. But regardless of the talk and complication and oftentimes gaslighting about what they are, and the communists wanting to throw shade and divorce themselves from fascism, even though they are mere reflections or cousins, if you would, two sides of the same coin. One is heads and one is tail, but the coin is still socialism. The coin is still authoritarianism. So we need to talk about this because lefties like to call everything under the sun, fascism, anything that they don't like. And I would concede to them that yes, fascism is right of communism, but it is not the same thing as being a liberal, a classical liberal, such as myself, to believe in free markets, libertarianism, laissez-faire economics, free markets, voluntarism, those things that basically make a strong and free society. So we're going to start with fascism, and we're going to go through a bunch of political type ideologies and economic philosophies, and we're going to kind of come around full circle. So I hope it's not going to be too dry. You can look all this information up yourself because I'm either going to just be using Britannica or Wikipedia, primarily Wikipedia, not to keep it simple, not to have it too complicated. Of course, we could read other sources that were, essentially slanted. I'm not saying Wikipedia isn't slanted, but slanted in the idea that if you read about fascism from a Marxist, it's something totally different, and it's kind of hard to understand or read anything about fascism from any actual fascist because so few people like to identify themselves that way. So let's get back here. This is the wiki article. Now, interestingly, I love how it starts off. It says, fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian ultranationalism. No, it's not far-right at all. In fact, if it were far-right, at least in the American context, we would be talking about constitutionalism. We would be talking about anarcho-capitalism. That is far-right. Now, I know that there's a political compass type test about, authoritarian economics and libertarian and all that stuff. But folks, the reality is that the primary mode of things is either authoritarianism or libertarianism. Freedom versus totalitarianism. That's just it. Period. And when you keep things on first principles, that is, whittling them down to the most basic concepts, you'll see all of the similarities that many of these authoritarian regimes hold and have, and how they actually are enacted. And you will see how it is just a matter of what means they apply, but the ends are always the same. And that is the important part. How do we end up? The process is important, absolutely. But if you end up doing a similar process and you get to the same end, it doesn't really matter. The end product is the same. So it says characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society, of the economy, which came into prominence in the early 20th century. And it says, of course, talks about the first fascist movements. But what is noted, needs to be noted, and if you read what the fascists said about their ideologies, you'll see here, it says, opposed to liberalism, democracy. Now, liberalism, that terminology there is talking about classical liberalism, essentially, and we're going to get to that. It's not what we think of today as modern liberal societies. But it's opposed to liberalism, democracy, Marxism, anarchism. Fascism is placed on the far right within the traditional left-right spectrum. We're going to address that too here in a bit. So a little further down in this article, we get to definitions, and it says, historians, political scientists, and other scholars have long debated the exact nature of fascism. Each group described as fascist has at least some unique elements, and many definitions of fascism have been criticized as either too wide or narrow. According to many scholars, fascism, especially once in power, has historically attacked communism. That's true. Conservatism and parliamentary libertarianism, or liberalism, attracting support primarily from the far right. Again, I don't agree there. Let's look at this little footnote. Yeah, this is kind of very modern if you look at the dating here. Some of this is a little bit later. But see, these things change because it wasn't considered this in its day. It wasn't considered this at all at the height of the fascist movements of the 20th century. In fact, it was considered a third way between communism and capitalism, essentially. But again, we'll get into it. One common definition of the term, frequently cited by reliable sources as a standard definition, is that of historian Stanley G. Payne. He focuses on three concepts: the fascist negotiations, anti-liberalism, anti-communism, and anti-conservatism. So if these are anti-liberal and anti-communistic, but also anti-conservative, how can you on the left call anyone a fascist when you don't even know what it means? Fascist goals and creation of a nationalist dictatorship to regulate economic structure and to transform social relations within a modern self-determined culture, and the expansion of the nation into an empire. Sounds a lot like communism, actually, to me. Transform social relations. This is neo-Marxism, folks. Postmodernism. Self-determined culture. Well, yeah, we get all that. That's what all the woke scold and all that stuff's about. And the expansion of a nation into an empire. Now, communists try to claim that everyone else is an imperialist, whether they are or not, but yet the stated goal of communism is to basically colonialize the world with communism. So they are colonizers just as much, if not more, than any other ideology. But that's what authoritarianism always does. It is an ideology that must seek out and devour and destroy all things that are not itself. It must push itself upon others. This is antithetical to the idea of classical liberalism. Fascist style, a political aesthetic of romantic symbolism. Now, this is largely Nazi Germany, Mass mobilization, a positive view of violence, and promotion of masculinity, youth, charismatic authoritarian leadership. I don't think that like having strong males is necessarily fascist, but that's the thing you'll find when you do look at ideologies. Political thoughts or ideologies and how people describe them, they often have overlaps. I would say Christianity promotes a strong masculine identity. At the same time, a strong masculine identity to the point where you are to lay down your arms and be a pacifist. Remember, Christ told Peter to bring a sword to the garden, but then he told him to put it away. Peter was prepared to fight, but he said, no, this is not the way that we're going to do things. It is a lesson for Peter because Peter was wanting to fight, apparently. He thought that the Messiah was going to bring some sort of uprising against the Roman Empire. It absolutely did. It did it through pacifism. Professor Jason Stanley, in his book How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, observed that the leader proposes that only he can solve it, and all of the political opponents are enemies or traitors. Yes, and if you read The Vampire Economy, you'll see that very clearly. This also, of course, takes effect in communism. Stanley says recent global events as of 2020, including the pandemic and the protests, have substantiated the concerns about how fascist rhetoric is showing up in politics and policies around the world. Well, I can tell you why it's showing up, because communism, the ideas of Marxism and socialism are so strong, and we have very strong authoritarian governments, and so people tend to react in a way in which they present their own form of authoritarianism. They are wrong on both accounts. It says historian John Lucas argues that there is no such thing as generic fascism. He claims that Nazism and communism are essentially manifestations of populism. And we're going to talk about populism here in a bit. That's why it's highlighted here. And it says that states such as Nazi Germany and fascist Italy are more different than similar. And that is true. They were quite different. Roger Griffin describes fascism as a genius of political ideologies whose mythic core is in its various permutations is paleogenetic form of populist ultra-nationalism. Griffin describes the ideology as having three core components: the rebirth myth, populist ultra-nationalism, and the myth of decadence. I mean, societies get decadent. One of the things that communists tend to promote is libertinism. In fact, if you look at, what's his name? Was it Leon Skoltzen's? If you look at the list he composed to the Congress on the House floor that was presented to the Library of Congress of the tactics the Marxists were trying to use, the Soviets were trying to use against the United States, it was to demoralize the population. Obviously, Yuri Bezmenov talks about this so famously. But we have to understand this. We have to understand that this isn't just a tendency of those regimes. And of course, to my mind, all communist regimes are essentially fascist regimes. Anyways, they just call themselves something different. In Griffin's view, fascism is a genuinely revolutionary trans-class form of anti-liberal, and in the latest analysis, anti-conservative nationalism. So again, Nazis are anti-conservative and anti-liberal. They are essentially Marxist. They're just a different kind of Marxist. Hitler himself said he rejected Jewish Bolshevism, but he said he also rejected Jewish capitalism. They thought this was a third way. Built on a complex range of theoretical and cultural influences, he distinguishes an interwar period in which it manifested itself in an elite-led but populist armed party, politics opposing socialism and liberalism, and promising radical politics to rescue the nation from decadence. Now, it does not oppose socialism. If you read the Nazi Party, the German Nazi Party's tenets, what they were seeking, it's like 27 points or whatever it was, you'll see that they were trying to invoke all kinds of socialism. And Mussolini, if you read his Doctrines of Fascism, which he basically wrote with Giovanni Gentili, you'll see that he wanted to invoke fascism. It says Robert Paxson says that fascism is a form of political behavior marked by obsessive preoccupation with community decline, humiliation, or victimhood, and by compensatory cults of unity, energy, and purity, in which a mass-based party of committed nationalist militants working in unease but effective collaborations with traditional elites abandons democratic liberties and pursues with redemptive violence and without ethical or legal restraint goals of internal cleansing and external expansion. That reads like Antifa to me. They believe in their victimhood, right? This is all the woke scold left stuff, the cult of woke, if you would, intersectionality, all that stuff. It's the same thing, folks, based on, again, first principles. And when you talk to a Marxist, they'll say something like, well, you just don't understand. You don't understand theory. You don't get theory, man. I'm like, yeah, your theory's been disproven time and time again because you're not accepting how human nature works, that power corrupts, absolutely, as Lord Acton famously stated. So here we're going to go to 19th century roots, and then we're going to move on from there. It says, Georges Vallejo's, founder of the first non-Italian fascist party, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, claimed the roots of fascism stem from the late 1800s Jacobin movement. How interesting. The Jacobins, those folks that were basically some of the early modern period communists. Seen in its totalitarian nature, a foreshadowing of the fascist state. Historian George Moss similarly analyzed fascism as an interior of a mass ideology of civil religion and the French Revolution, as well as the result of brutalization of societies in 1914 and 1918. I would agree with that because the First World War allowed it to be brought up. Historians such as Irene Collins and Howard C. Paynes see Napoleon III, who ran a police state and suppressed the media, as a forerunner of fascism, and so forth. And you can see this. So it has its roots in Jacobinism. Now, I'm going to get into what is left and right here in a minute. I'm just going to read a little bit more here on what is fascism. The historian Zev Sternhell has traced the ideological roots of fascism back to the 1880s, and particular in the Findi, however you pronounce that, theme of that time. The theme was based on the revolt against materialism. Okay, so this is one of the objections against communism, because communism is a materialistic ideology. Materialism, folks, for communists is the goal. Like, they think everyone needs to have the same amount of materials in order to be happy. What they don't understand is that people win the lottery and end up killing themselves, or they get rich, or that a lot of very wealthy folks, like Hollywood types, are actually, very screwed up individuals, right? They're not necessarily happy because they are wealthy. Wealth does not bring happiness. If that were the case, everyone in all society ever throughout history, pretty much up until recently, would have just been miserable, sad sacks. Joy comes from other things, folks. Joy comes from a good spiritual life, a good religious life, and family and friends, and doing things that basically give you purpose and meaning. In any case, here it says, it was a revolt based on materialism, rationalism, positivism, and bourgeois society and democracy. It says supports emotionalism, irrationalism, and subjectivism, and vitalism. They regarded civilization as being in crisis, requiring a mass and total solution. And this is absolutely true. From Hitler to Mussolini, if you read this, that's exactly what they thought. Mussolini's Doctrines of Fascism, very easy read. You can read it in a few hours at most. It might take an hour or two, depending on how quickly you read. And it says straight up, right out front, that yeah, that there's a degradation of society. What seems to be the right or whatever's coming up about now is looking at the degradation of society, and then they're going back and harkening back to these ideas, but they're not really solidly based. They're just they're not, because they don't understand that they're just as brutal and just as awful as communists. Um, and it's the idea that might makes right. And again, it all comes down to authoritarianism. It says their intellectual school considered the individual as only one part of a collectivity, which should not be viewed as a numerical sum of autonomized individuals. They condemn the rationalistic individualism of liberal society and a disillusion of social links in bourgeois society. And again, this is very clear in Mussolini's writings, or Giovanni Gentili. Um, really needs to be understood, folks. Like, communism works almost exactly the same way. They just focus more on the class struggle. The fascists saw themselves as more of a ethnic identity, as a group, as a nation, as a people of a common culture. And there's nothing wrong with celebrating your culture or common identity. But they wanted to take it and they say, well, we need to bolster this up because we're superior to others, where this racial superiority idea came in. And this comes into this next sentence. It says outlooks was influenced by various intellectual developments, including Darwin, Wagner's aesthetics, Arthur D. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I'm bad with French names, guys, but rationalism, Gustav Le Bon's psychology, and the philosophies of Friedrich Nietzsche, who talked about the Uberman, the Ubermensch, who was basically a man who could live without God or the state would take over. Dostoevsky, who actually would have preached against this kind of stuff, and Henry Bergson. Social Darwinism, which was gaining widespread acceptance, made no distinction between physical and social life, and viewed the human condition as being an unceasing struggle to achieve the survival of the fittest. And that's about all I'm going to go on with that. Let's get into this whole left-right divide idea. So it says the political right on the political spectrum is a system classifying political positions, left-right ideologies and parties based on the issues of social equality and social hierarchy. In addition to positions of left on the left and on the right, there are centrist, blah blah blah, people that they're kind of in the middle, or they don't really lean one way or another. On the type of political spectrum, left-right politics, they're presented as opposed, although a particular individual or group may take a left-wing stance on one matter, blah, 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 and this is the main thing. The term originated in France. The left has been called the party of the movement, and the right the party of order. And see, this is when we get into the basic ideas of left and right, is that the left, or the progressives, are always trying to move society forward. They can't be satisfied. The problem is sometimes society just needs to stay where it's at least as far as how the governments work, because if you lurch forward too quickly, you advance too fast in certain areas, and you haven't thought out things well, you actually create a societal collapse. And that's what we will see, and that's what we have seen every time in extreme left-wing movements. So here it says origins in the French Revolution. We're going to get to that. So left-wing politics support social equality and egalitarianism. That is not necessarily true. In a classical sense, yes, that's why I, being a classical liberal, would believe that. But there's no such thing as true equality, folks. We can get into the whole thing of the story of Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. And it's a nice little short story. I did one of my early videos, kind of a maybe cringy, but whatever, it's still up, radio type play of it, because a lot of people don't know Harrison Bergeron, and it's a great little story. And it's about a 20-minute read. And it's about making people so equal that basically, if you're smart, you have to have a little thing in your ear that goes off every 2 or 3 minutes, so you can't collect your thoughts. Or if you're really strong, you have to wear a bunch of weights. Or if you're really pretty, you have to wear an ugly mask. That's kind of it's a parody. And Vonnegut was a socialist, as far as I understand, but he knew the extremes, much like Orwell. Left-wing politics typically involves a concern for those in society whom its adherents perceive as disadvantaged relative to others, as well as a belief there's unjust inequalities that need to be reduced or abolished. So, victimhood. What did we read over here about fascism? That it basically talked about, it had its foundings in victimhood and Jacobinism, and that people were essentially being victims of degeneracy. The real difference with modern, like, neo-Marxist type thought or postmodernist type thought is that they use victimhood as a means of power. They actually take it and use it narcissistically to prop themselves up. It says left-wing supporters claim that human development flourishes when individuals engage in cooperative, mutual, respectful relations that can thrive only when excessive differences in status, power, and wealth are eliminated. No, because everyone is different. Not everyone is able to do the job of a neurosurgeon. Not everyone is able to understand. They don't have the intelligence. Some people don't have the work ethic. And these are evil Marxist lies that everyone is equally the same. It is just not true, folks. I am a short guy. I'm a short dude. I'm a manlet, if you would, and yet, it's it. I don't really care, but I'm not equal to the guy who's like 6'5" or 6'4". I can take care of myself. I'm not physically intimidating or anything, but people automatically look at you differently if you're like a big old 6'4", 250-pound guy. It's just reality. We respect tall people for no other reason other than that, really, that they're tall. I mean, we see it as a sign of good genetics as well. But people tend not to mess with bigger, taller guys because they're automatically afraid. People underestimate me, my abilities I have before in the past, and not that I'm like the baddest dude on the planet or anything, but I'm just saying, because of my size, people make judgments like that all of the time, and we just have to acknowledge that there are differences, and different people have different skills and abilities. I probably brought it up before, but I had a friend I used to work with who was a tremendous handyman. He hated computers, and he would talk about how he didn't want to do it, and I'd help him with like report writing or whatever else that we needed to do, and he would essentially tell me, oh, thanks, man, because I don't really know how to do these things, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm not that smart. And I'm like, dude, yeah. And if I need someone to, rip apart my car and rebuild it or do some plumbing or build anything, and the guy was a butcher too on the side. I mean, he had all kinds of skills. It did not give himself credit because of the way society looks at those kind of skills. Why? Because they're physical labor, and we in our society value intellectual labor. And unjustly. It's kind of snobbish in my opinion. It says, within the left-right political spectrum, left-right were coined during the French Revolution, referring to the French estate generals. Those who sat on the left generally opposed the Ancien regime and the Bourbon monarchy and supported the French Revolution. And I've talked about this before, so again, just to skip ahead. So right-wing politics, I find this really interesting. This article is currently undergoing a major edit by the Guild of Copy Editors. Okay. And that's like as of today. Right-wing politics embrace the view that certain social orders and hierarchies are inevitable. Yeah, they are, because they're genetic. They're actually biologically instilled. We can see that in any sort of social animal, which all animals are basically social, and there's always hierarchies. We see that in men and their testosterone levels. The people at the top of the hierarchy with the most power tend to have higher levels of testosterone, and we see this in animals that are males as well. So it says they're inevitable, natural, normal, or desirable. typically support this position on the basis of natural law. Yeah, I believe in natural law. That's right. Laws that God put into place, economics or tradition. Absolutely. Folks, economics, believe it or not, is basically a form of natural law. It's just a way of looking at how human beings interact. And there are very predictive things in basic economics that tell us how we interact. And all these theories, mostly that were developed, have been about economics, have basically been done in the last few centuries. But we can look at people cross-culturally time and time again and how they interact, and we can see what works and what doesn't. And there are certain things that don't work very well, like fiat currency, which we currently are on. Hierarchy and inequality may be seen as a natural result of traditional social differences or competition in the market economies. Yeah. I mean, some people are going to be better at some things than others. You just got to find your niche. Communists seem to think, the far leftists seem to think, that you're just going to automatically put in your niche. They look at people based on like the ideas of Taylorism, which is like some mathematical business model that doesn't work. And it's how the Soviet Union first tried to organize itself. The political terms left and right were first used in the 18th century during the French Revolution. Okay. So one of the things it talks about too is that they could be the right wing can generally be referred to conservatives or reactionaries. So what's a reactionary? Well, in political science, reactionary or reactionist is a person, entity holding political views that favor a return to previous political state of society. That's not really true. Maybe a neo-reactionary, but a reactionary is always traditionally seen as someone who wanted to return to monarchism. And it says this is one tradition in right-wing politics. The left-right spectrum, it's in the right-wing side. Well, it's not returning to anything per se. It's that people see that there was an order, a social order that worked pretty well, and then we decided to get away from it, and it goes on. And so here we see right here about, again, restoration of the French monarchy. And this is where it all comes from. All these terminologies, all these words go back to the French Revolution. So when I watch someone like Tim Pool and he's like, well, we really can't define these things today. We don't really, there's no left or right anymore. There absolutely is. It's that most people aren't educated enough, and the Marxist and the postmodernists want to confuse language. They do this on purpose because they want to destroy the hierarchy. The problem is there's always a hierarchy. Their whole goal is to destroy power through power. Again, might makes right. You're going to hear me say that a lot because it's an authoritarian mindset. Whereas a classical liberal thinks that there should be minimal government, a watchman type government that protects you. Minarchism is what I favor. Basically locally based with very little strong federal government, anything like that. I would like to see people have the maximum amount of liberty. And if there's a dispute between me and my neighbor, then we can either settle it between ourselves or we can go to a judge or something. But we don't do that anymore. We just do stupid stuff like sue each other or whatever, which isn't probably as bad as it used to be since the Supreme Court ruled against frivolous lawsuits many years ago. But aside from that, of course, there's minarchist contracts that you enter into. I live in suburbia and I'm in an HOA. And I kind of regret doing that. I wish I moved into another house with a cheaper HOA and whatever else. But, you make your bed, you got to lie in it. You got to take responsibility for what you do. And the fact of the matter is that here in West Virginia, HOA is a form of government. And it's recognized. And you know what? The state government doesn't have much power or authority over it. So, moving on, we get to corporatism. Not to be confused with corporate capitalism. That's kind of messed up. I got corptocracy here as well. But in essence, corporatism is a political ideology that advocates the organization of society by corporate groups such as agriculture, labor, military, scientific, or guild associations. It's basically what we do here in the United States. We have corporatism. Corporatism is sort of a form of soft fascism. One of the things that this article did not talk about at all, really, was the real economics of fascism. And typically when people do, they always try to make it out to be as if as if it was capitalism, and it's not. Fascism presented presented itself as an alternative to both international socialism and free market capitalism. So when a commie says that capitalists are fascists, they're idiots, and I mean they're all idiots anyways. They believe in the most absurd ideology. I'm not afraid to say that, when you believe in something that's been proven wrong and it completely neglects human nature and it wants to bring you back to a basic tribal society, yeah, it's silly. And not only that, but guys, trade and free markets and all that was like a natural thing that human beings did once they were interacting with other societies, and they started to gain wealth. They started to gain technology and the ability to travel outside of their villages and meet other tribes that might have other goods and services. It is a natural extension of thing. If I invent something really cool, like a stick with a spear tip on it, and it kills animals, you might want one too. And you could beat me for it or kill me for it, might makes right. Or you could trade with me, and maybe I want something you got. Maybe you grow some food or something, and that's how it starts. Like, this is basic anthropology, economics. We know this. We see it time and time again. There's still primitive tribal societies that live around the world, and we've been able to actually study them in the 19th and 20th century because they were still quite isolated. Some fascism opposed mainstream socialism. It sometimes regarded itself as a type of nationalistic socialism to highlight their commitment to national solidarity and unity. Fascists opposed international free market capitalism. Now, here's the thing. I'm not a globalist, but when I talk about globalism, we're talking about a movement, an idea that toward a one world government. I'm all about free trade, though. That's a whole nother issue. But one of the problems the United States has is that we don't trade fairly. What we do is we basically give everyone else the advantage, and a lot of this is like under the table, like exchange stuff, because they don't really care about you. But supported a type of productive capitalism. No, it didn't at all. In fact, I've gone through this before, but you can read Ludwig von Mises' assessment of it. You can read The Vampire Economy. It is a highly controlled, centralized authority government. And if basically you weren't in the know, you weren't with the party or whatever, you weren't going to get goods. And they could shut you down at any point they wanted to. Economic self-sufficiency, known as autarky, was a major goal of the fascist governments. And it says fascist governments advocated resolution of domestic class conflict with a nation in order to secure national solidarity. So again, we go to the same thing. It's much like communistic ideas. This would be done through the state mediating relations between classes, contrary to the views of classical liberal-inspired capitalists. While fascism was opposed to domestic class conflict, it was held that bourgeois-proletariat conflict existed primarily in national conflict between proletariat nations and bourgeois nations. So, whatever. We're going to keep going. So we talked about reactionaries. We're into corporatism here. So, again, corporatism is much what we do here in the United States. And of course, the ideas have been expressed since ancient Greece and Roman societies, integrating Catholic social teachings and Christian democratic politics. Folks, you shouldn't be, neo-Calvinism, that would make sense because it's all Augustinianism. You shouldn't be, it's one thing to be politically aware. It's one thing to want your leaders to be doing good and the nation to do well. It's another thing to mourn for your country, as I did yesterday. It's very upsetting, the things that are going on in our nation. But like, the Bible is a libertarian book. God is your king. Christ is your king if you are a Christian. And remember, Christ had nothing to do with politics. He said, render unto Caesar, meaning, give Caesar his tribute, give him his taxes, whatever. Otherwise, leave it be. Christianity is an anti-materialistic ideology, which is why it's antithetical to Marxism, by the way, folks. And it says they've been paired by various advocates and implemented in various societies in a wide variety. Corporatism may refer to economic tripartitism involving negotiations between labor and business. Yeah. And it goes on about it. But it talks about progressive corporatism, talks about the different factions. But essentially, it's something like this. You have corporations that are essentially codified and propped up by the state, like Americans' farming industry, like the railroad system, right? Like airlines. Now, is there a profit there? Yeah, of course. Wall Street, the banking system, all those things, folks. Corporatism. This isn't crony capitalism. That's like a made up word. Like, I hate how capitalism is misused. There's free trade, and then there is centralized planned economies. And we don't have a free market in the United States because we have a centralized bank. Here we have social corporatism, also called social democratic corporatism, is a form of economic tripartite corporatism based upon social partnerships between interest of capital and labor involving collective bargaining between the representatives of employees and laborers mediated by the government and a national level. This is basically fascism, and it's basically socialism light. It's what it is. It's corporate type socialism. It's got the word social in it, right? Corptocracy, again from corporate, meaning the body, is a form of plutocracy. Well, what's plutocracy? Plutocracy is wealth, or plutarchy is a society that is ruled or controlled by people of great wealth or income. Who would that be? Well, that would be our ruling class in the United States. You know how much money you have to raise, how wealthy you generally have to be in a powerful position in the United States government? I mean, Donald Trump had to do it on his own. He had to do it on his own against all odds. There weren't going to be people behind him. It says, unlike systems of democracy, liberalism, socialism, communism, or anarchism, plutocracy is not rooted in an established political philosophy. No, it's a terminology used to, as I often say, plutocrats, to talk about the wealthy, the elites who run things. And this is also oligarchy. It's a form of power structure in which power rests in a small number of people. Those people may be distinguished by nobility, wealth, education, corporate, religious, political, or military control. Such states are often controlled by families who pass their influence from one generation to the next, like the Clintons or the Bushes, or name a dynasty family in the United States. Nancy Pelosi, right? Her family's in politics all over the place. The Bidens, right? They're trying to do the same thing right now. It says, throughout histories, oligarchies have often been tyrannical, relying on public obedience or oppression to exist. Aristotle pioneered the use of the term as a means rule by the rich, for which another term commonly used today, plutocracy. And, again, we can read about this on and on. So fascists are, let's see here. Well, where was my first article at? Fascists are authoritarian, totalitarian, right? Totalitarian one-party state. How is that any different from oligarchy? How is that any different from the Chinese Communist Party? They are an oligarchy, folks, and actually they're an ethnic oligarchy. China is run by the Han Chinese. There are numerous ethnic groups within China. They have different languages or dialects of language. It's not just Mandarin and Cantonese. There are all kinds of other languages and ethnic groups, but the Hans run things. So, again, we have to see what these things are. Now, we have, I kind of got that out of order. We have tyranny of the majority. So tyranny of the majority is a tyranny of the masses and an inherent weakness in majority rule, in which the majority of the electorate pursues exclusively its own objects at the expense of those of the minority factions, like the Democratic Party. The majority, comparable to that of a tyrant or despot, argued John Stuart Mill in his 1959 book on liberty. Hey, I know that guy. That's what all this all minus one stuff's about. Anyways, so centralization excesses when the centralized power of a federation make a decision that should be local, breaking with the commitment to the subsidiary principle. Typical solutions in this condition are concurrent majority and supermajority rules, abandonment of rationality when, as Tocqueville remembered, a decision which based its claims to rule upon numbers, not upon rightness or excellence. Does this sound like familiar to you, our government right now? This is pretty common, folks, because this is how it always goes. You cannot escape this inevitability within governments. And I'm a big fan of de Tocqueville, Alexis de Tocqueville's amazing work, and I've talked about him before in the past. If you missed some of my earlier stuff, go back. In fact, a lot of my earlier videos are a little bit shorter. You might enjoy them a little bit better. So here we have democracy, and of course it's demos, the people, and kratos, the rule. It's a form of government which the people have the authority to choose the government legislatures. Yeah. But regardless of all the talk that we have today, oh, they're ruining our democracy. What do we actually have? Well, we have a corporate, plutocratic, oligarchical tyranny of the majority. And with that system, we have a little bit of fascism in the way we are economically organized. As I was, let me get back to that. As I was reading here a little bit earlier, right? And that we don't have actual free markets, and we don't in the United States, folks. You're fooling yourself if you think that you can have a centralized bank and not and have a free market. That's not a free market. A free market disseminates money to the hands of the people. That's why we're supposed to be on a gold and silver standard in the United States. But, unconstitutionally, we got off of that. So here, democratic centralism. Democratic centralism is the practice in which political decisions reached by voting processes are binding upon all members of the political party. Although mainly associated with Leninism, interesting. Do you mean democracies associated with commies? Wherein the party's political vanguards, composed of professional revolutionaries, practiced democratic centralism to elect leaders and officers, as well as to determine policies through free discussion. So why do I bring this up? Well, I bring this up because democracy, in the end, is always socialism. And when we're talking, it becomes socialism. It becomes communism. When we're talking all the time, we're saying, this is a threat to our democracy. This is a threat to our democracy. What the people are saying is it's a threat to our corporate socialist oligarchy. It's a threat to our plutocracy. That's what that means when the governments say that, when the people in the government say such things. They're saying it's a threat to our special power. Look at what happened the other day with the people going into the Capitol building, which we now know they were let in. I mean, there were some people that did some rambunctious, stupid stuff, but it seemed like a minority. And what we saw was people on the Senate floor then going, they went in these hallowed grounds, the inner sanctum, as if it was the holies of holies, the place in the Jewish temple where the Ark of the Covenant sat and God's very presence was supposed to be. Like, folks, this is why I talk about, and so many other people talk about, statism, or the worship of the state, is religion, or leftism as religion. This is what Nietzsche said. God is dead. He said that, sadly, even though he was an atheist, but in his rational mind, he couldn't believe in God, and therefore he thought, well, man, without God, without religion, we're going to have a really hard time. We're going to have a really powerful state. And that, again, that is what fascism is about. Fascism makes the state essentially the religion. It actually says that in the doctrines of fascism. So here we get in a German Democratic Party, and then the doctrines of democratic centralism served as one of the sources of split between Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. The Mensheviks supported a looser party discipline within the Russian system. And again, I could keep going on, but I just want you guys to understand all this stuff. Democratic confederalism. This goes on about, again, another form of basically socialism that gets into The PPK was originally guided by the prospects of creating a Kurdish national state on Marxist-Leninist basis. And I mean, how many times has this been tried, folks? Just constantly, over and over again. It's always tyranny. It's always oligarchy. It's always the rich folks. It's the people that get in the power. You don't want this. You want as little government as you can possibly stand. And you want to take care of yourself. I'm telling you, for your children and your grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren, for their futures. We've become so soft. We just think we needed handouts to everything. And you're going to wish differently when mass poverty comes in during this great reset that the Biden administration, or the Harris administration, I should say, is going to bring in. So talks about the proposal for democratic libertarian socialism. Well, what is that? We keep going down the roads. Well, basically, it's socialist anarchism, right? Libertarian socialism, also referred to as anarcho-socialism. You can't have socialism that's anarchic. It's not possible. This is where the term libertarian originally came from, by the way. But it's just not possible, folks. This is the concept that Marx actually espoused originally. And if we get down here, it says that Marx and anarchist are Marx-inspired thought, as well as other left libertarian tendencies. Anarchism and libertarian Marxism are the main current of libertarian socialism. Now, this idea, folks, was that what Antifa says they are. They're anarchists. We're anarchists. No, you're authoritarians. An anarchist would be like an anarcho-capitalist, would want to leave you alone. There's no authority. It means without state, right? No state. And you can't have socialism that way, because you got to make sure that everyone works together. I read you the story of Thanksgiving, a month ago. The story of Thanksgiving was about a socialist society and Plymouth, and it just didn't work. It didn't work because people have natural tendencies toward things. They didn't like their wives working for these single men and scrubbing their britches, and they didn't like that they had to feed these other people with their labor when they decided to be lazy. This is what you get. You encourage libertinism, which is really what all this is about. It's about being libertine and hedonistic. And then we have democratic socialism. It's not socialism. It's democratic socialism. Let me comb my hair with a balloon. Crazy, crazy Bernie. Democratic Republic. We talk about, we have a democratic republic. And this was kind of sort of the idea that we had historically. In the U.S., the notion that a republic is a form of democracy was common from the time of its foundings and the concepts associated with representative democracy. And it says here with John Adams. The thing is, however, it's thrown around a lot. Many countries use the term democratic republic. Algeria, Congo, Ethiopia, North Korea. So what does it really mean? Well, it doesn't mean much unless you're actually following the principles of these ideas based in Rome, as the Roman Empire was before the Roman Empire was in place and was originally a republic with a constitution. It has a rule of law. And again, here's democracy and Marxism. In Marxist theory, a new democratic society will rise through the organized actions of an international working class enfranchising the entire population and freeing up humans to act without being bound by the labor market. Yeah, it's absurdity. Basically, you'll have people that want to work, because some people want to work all the time. They're just driven to work. They're hyper industrious. It's part of their personality, right? They cannot not work. My mom's like this, man. Where I'm moderately industrious, I like my off time. I like to chill, dude. It's like, when I chill, though, I'm usually reading and studying and whatever else, or watching news. But I'm just saying, this is this concept that everyone would they would just work together. There are Marxist professors out there that will teach you, the way you can run a factory is a co-op. And see, one day, one guy will be the foreman, then you'll be the line worker, and then you switch all around. Have you ever worked a real job? Do you know how idiotic that is? Do you know how many morons there are that just could not be a foreman, that would goof off? There's a reason why meritocracy works, folks. There's a reason why hierarchies work, because some people are better at some things than others. I don't have the most delicate touch, nimble hands. When I was an artist growing up and drew all the time, I have a tendency to press really hard. I have a heavy hand. I actually hit really hard too when it comes to martial arts for my size because I'm really, really heavy. Part of that I learned too through doing Russian martial arts, but it's almost a natural extension. When I shoot pool, I don't really shoot pool anymore, but I used to shoot pool a lot in my 20s. I have my own pool cue. I play with a 14.5 ounce pool cue. You know why? Because a heavy cue, I rack the balls across the room, man. Like I need something light because I naturally just hit harder. I don't mean to, but I do. Some people have certain natural skills and abilities better than others. Some people have gained those abilities over time. But there is no such thing as universal education. Some people will understand better than others some things than others. Let's get down here to Engels. It says, what will be the course of this revolution? Principles of communism, Frederick Engels wrote, above all, it will establish a democratic constitution, and through this, the direct or indirect dominance of the proletariat. What it will do is it'll create a big state, and then the state will never give up its power. And 19th century, the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Engels called for the international political unification of Europe working class in order to achieve a communist revolution, and proposed that because the socio-economic organization of communism was of a higher form than of capitalist workers' revolution. And funny, I hovered over revolution. What is that a picture of? It's a picture of the Jacobins and the French Revolution. It's just reiterations of the same stuff, guys, and then people making it overly technical and trying to divide it up. No, first principles. Same crap, different day, right? Liberal democracy. Now here we get to actual right-wingness, actual liberty. Okay? Liberal democracy is also referred to as Western democracy, is a political ideology, a form of government which representative democracy operates under the principles of liberalism, which we'll get to in a second. It is characterized by elections between multiple distinct political parties, a separation of powers into different branches. Notice how that's been destroyed and chipped away at over the centuries, the last century and especially the last few decades in the United States. The rule of law also ignored completely by our leaders, and everyday life as part of an open society, an market economy with private property, an equal protection of human rights, civil liberties, and political freedoms. See, in a communist society and an oligarchy, you don't get all this. And a tyranny, you don't get this. In fascism, you don't get this. They are, birds of a feather, if you would. They're all ducks. They just, have different coats. To define a system in practice, liberal democracies often draw upon a constitution either codified, such as the United States, or uncodified, such as the UK, to delineate the powers of the government and enshrine a social contract, except for it's ignored all the time. And it gets into some differences. Liberalism. Now here, notice it says modern liberalism in the United States. I actually didn't have that pulled up, but let's pull it up. Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed, and equality before the law. Doesn't seem like what liberalism is today, now does it? Liberalism espouses a wide array of views depending on their understanding of these principles, but they generally support free markets, free trade, limited government, individual rights, civil rights, and human rights, capitalism, democracy, secularism. Now, depends on what you're talking about. Secularism as far as the governments, sure. Secularism as far as life, no. Religious life is important, folks. Spiritual life is important. Gender equality, racial equality, internationalism, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of religion. So when the fascists reject liberalism, as they do here, that's what they're rejecting. How does my ideology, and I really don't like the idea of ideologies, but I'm saying this is the closest type of ideology that I would align with, which is why I go around calling myself classical liberal. Here it says, but anyways, the fascists are against it. So how can I be a classical liberal, be hated by the commies as a fascist? Because I'm a free market capitalist dog. It's absurdness, guys. It's all absurd. Fascists have more in common with communists, and they know it. They just don't like it because of the racial issue with Hitler. And mind you, folks, Hitler just didn't kill Jews. He killed gypsies. He killed mentally handicapped people, physically handicapped people, and dozens and dozens of Christians. I don't know if you ever heard of the White Rose Society, but they were folks that were against the Nazi Party who were a Christian organization at the time. Liberalism, because of a distinct movement, or became a distinct movement in the Age of Enlightenment, when it became popular among Western philosophers and economists. Liberalism sought to replace the norms of hereditary privilege, state religion, absolute monarchy, and the divine rights of kings, and traditional conservatism. That is, traditional conservatism was for the monarchy. Conserving means to, keep what is old, right? With representative democracy and the rule of law. Liberals also ended mercantilism, which is more or less a form of corporatism. And it goes on and, wait a minute, wrong article. And royal monopolies and other barriers to trade. Instead, promoting free trade and free markets, philosopher John Locke is often credited with founding liberalism as a distinct tradition based on the social contract, arguing that each man has a natural right, life, liberty, and property, and governments must not violate these rights. While the British liberal tradition has emphasized expanding democracy, French liberalism has emphasized rejecting authoritarianism and is linked to nation building. Not really, though. Not really. It's more about communism for the French. It really is. And it talks about the French Revolution and the philosophies of liberalism, armed royal tyrannies, but then they became the tyranny themselves. Whereas America didn't do that. Now, as we got taken over by progressives, leftists in the early 20th century, yeah, that happened. And that's why we're at where we're at now 100 years later. And we're about to go almost full on commie. But it'll be a slight delineation of communism, once the Great Reset comes. That stakeholder capitalism. Modern liberalism in the United States. Modern liberalism is a dominant version of liberalism in the United States. It combines the ideas of civil liberty and equality and supports social justice. Social justice is code for commie talk. It's code for communism, neo-Marxism. And parties are liberal. Have always, according to Ann Adams, all major American parties are liberal and always have been. Essentially, they espouse classical liberalism. Imagine that. Let's go to that. That is a form of democratized Whig constitutionalism. That's one of the early parties, plus free market. The point and the difference comes from the influence of social liberalism. Economically, yes, the difference is social liberalism. I am not socially liberal, although I don't care if you are. Economically, modern liberalism opposes cuts to the social safety net. Classical liberalism would. Absolutely. Read de Tocqueville. Read Bastiat. Now, he was kind of okay with a little bit of one, but he talked about basically pillaging the coffers. And once the Americans found that they could do that, de Tocqueville stated this, and I believe Bastiat talked about this as well, or just in general. It's like the politicians, once they figure out they can do this thing, just buy off the public, which is what they do. Classical liberalism. Classical liberalism is a political ideology and branch of liberalism that advocates for civil liberties and the rule of law with an emphasis on economic freedom, closely related to economic liberalism. It's developed in the 19th century. Yeah, they're all basically the same, folks. It's like, yeah. John Bautista, yeah. I mean, like classical economics, the wealth of nations, all that stuff. And all the anti-liberals, they just don't get it. Because they think that that's what they live in, and they don't. They don't understand that they live in a command, centralized economy. Classical liberalism is decentralized, small government, and it must be. Now, a republic, very quickly, meaning public affairs, is a form of government in which a country is considered a public matter, not a private concern or property, meaning it's not corporatist, right? You have to understand this. You really have to understand this. The primary position of power within a republic are attained through democracy and a mix of democracy with oligarchy or autocracy, rather than being unalterably occupied by a given family lineage or group. So here, admittedly, oligarchies are formed within republics generally. Now, this is how the Roman Senate actually worked. But the United States was not so much so that, but is so much so that now. So it says the word republic comes from the Latin, which is res publica, which literally means public thing, public matter, or public affair, and was used to refer to a state as a whole. The term developed its modern meaning in reference to the constitution of the ancient Roman Republic, as I stated earlier, last from the overthrow of the kings in 509 BC and establishment in the empire in 27 BC. Isn't that interesting? They want 500 years in a republic and it degenerated. And we're in the course of nearly 300 years, and we've degenerated tremendously. This constitution was characterized by a Senate composed of wealthy aristocrats wielding significant influence, several popular assemblies of all free citizens pressing the power to elect magistrates and pass laws, and a series of magistracies with varying types of civil and political authority. Most often, a republic is a single sovereign state, but there are also other sovereign states, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, it talks about the Soviet Union considering itself a republic. So a republic doesn't have to organize itself economically as free markets, but I want you to understand the difference between that and a democracy or a direct democracy. Libertarianism. Libertarianism is essentially classical liberalism, folks. From the French libertarian, Latin libertas, which means freedom, and upholds liberty as its core principles. Libertarians seek to maximize autonomy, political freedom, freedom of association, freedom of choice, individualism, and voluntary association. Libertarians are skeptical of authority and state power, but some of them diverge on the scope of the opposition of existing economic and political systems. Now, we're not talking about the party here. Libertarianism originated as a form of left-wing politics, such as anti-authoritarian and anti-state socialist, like anarchist. But see, that's not how you can't have it. You have to enforce socialism. You have to. Because if people start to get wealthy, they don't like socialism anymore. Socialism makes people poor, folks. You can't just share everything all the time and expect everyone to pitch in and do whatever. It's not as easy as you think. Most of you people talking about this stuff have never led anyone anywhere to do anything. Never been in charge of anybody. Never managed anybody. This is especially social anarchists, but more generally, libertarian communists, Marxist, and libertarian socialists. These libertarians seek to abolish capitalism and private ownership and the means of production. Well, how do you do that without force? Or these to restrict the purview or effects to what's that? Infrastruct? I don't know this word. They're limited to real, right? Civil law, whatever. Property norms in favor of common or cooperative ownership and management, viewing private property as a barrier to freedom and liberty. No, private property, you own yourself, right? If you don't own yourself, you're a slave, right? Someone else owns you. So it's real simple, guys. It's real simple. First principles. Always first principles first. Left libertarian ideologies include anarchist schools of thought, alongside many other anti-paternalistic new left schools of thought, blah, 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 goes on. And it talks about, in the 20th century, right libertarian proponents of anarcho-capitalism. Minarchism co-opted the term libertarian to advocate laissez-faire capitalism and a strong private property rights, such as land, infrastructure, and natural resources, which is actually what our government was basically founded on, classical liberalism. These are all tied. But you see how I started all the way over there with Nazism and the authoritarian and how I'm going to the right? And as I go to the right, we're seeing these views are actually less restrictive, smaller government. Now, populism, this is what Donald Trump is. He has been. Refers to the range of political stances that emphasize the idea of people, often juxtapose this group against the elite. When people talk about the elite, they're talking about the oligarchs. They're talking about the plutocrats. They're talking about the tyranny of the majority who are in power, not necessarily the majority of the population. Right? Hold on. Let's get back to populism here. So the term developed in the 19th century and has been applied to various politicians, parties, movements, such a time, although has rarely been chosen as self-description. Yeah. And basically, it's someone that listens to the people. According to um, the ideological approach, populism is often um, combined with other ideologies such as nationalism, liberalism, or socialism. This populace can be found at different locations along the left-right spectrum. And there exists left-wing populism and right-wing populism. Yeah. I don't think that Donald Trump was any way, shape, or form a fascist by having more liberalism in the country. Um, Now, trade deals maybe, like more nationalistic, but that's good for Americans, folks. Why do you want your income to be not good? Why do you want to be hindered with trade with other nations, especially when we do the world policing for them? It's just silliness. And I don't want to be a part of the world policing either, folks. I think we need to get away from all this stuff. I'm very anti-war, but it's just silly the things that the media would say about it. But it's because they're all the corporate oligarchs. They're all the plutocrats. They're all the elites. They don't care about you. Now let's read about totalitarianism. And interesting, here we have commie, fascist, and commie. Totalitarian is a concept from a form of government or political system that prohibits opposition parties, restricts individual opposition to the state and the claims, and exercises an extremely high degree of control over public and private life. Sounds like what the United States is becoming with big tech and legacy media. And, the New York Times, all those organizations that like to put out propaganda. Oh, look, there's the word propaganda right there. Encompassing campaigns which propaganda is broadcast by statewide controlled mass media. What do you think the corporate media is? You know that they have ties to the CIA, right? Why do you think they get all these former FBI agents and CIA people and going, oh, Donald Trump did this and did that, when there actually was no proof whatsoever? Folks, you need to wake up to what the system actually is. You need to understand your definitions. You need to be equipped to argue. You need to be able to cut down the people who would oppose you with your words. I do not believe in using violence, but I am allowed by the authority of God to use words as my violence, to make an argument, to give an account of why I believe what I believe, as Paul said. Or sorry, I believe that was Peter. Whatever it is, whoever it was, one of the apostles. And he says, autocracy is a system of government which is supreme power over the state is concentrated in the hands of one person whose decisions are subject to neither external or legal restraints or regularized mechanisms of popular control. So this is one person, okay? And this is constitutions and authoritarian regimes. I don't know why I had this brought up. In any case, this is authoritarianism, not just totalitarianism, right? They're all similar things. It's a form of government characterized by the rejection of a political plurality, the use of strong central power, and preserve the political status quo, and reductions in the rule of all, separations of power, and democratic voting. What just happened? What did we just see? We saw the continuation of the status quo. The rule of law has been out the window for a long time, folks. The people in power in Congress and Senate, they don't care. Separations of power, basically, they've been destroyed for a long time. FDR started that trend, and it it just gets worse and worse and worse. And the reduction in democratic voting. What do we see? Just mass mail-in ballots. Like voter ID, secure voting, is something they do all around the world. Not here in the United States. It's racist. No. You're just authoritarian, and you know you can get away with stuff. You're not a genuine person. Political scientists have created many typologies, and then it talks about autocrats, oligarchs, blah, 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 blah. We go on. You notice how these all link back to each other, right? Authoritarianism, from the Britannica, principle of blind submission to authority as opposed to individual freedom and thought of action in government. Authoritarianism denotes a political system that concentrates power in the hands of a leader or a small elite that is not constitutionally responsible to the body of the people. Who's constitutionally responsible? Right now, the president is about to get impeached when he has, how many days left in office? 12? Come on. Seriously? This is so he can't come back. Because all of their rhetoric that they've used over the years, it wasn't good enough for them. So it wasn't good enough for the folk that decided to do all this stuff, you know. Let's see. I got a thing here I want to bring up real quick. I don't know if it's that or not. Anyways, I played the video before numerous times, but it was Elijah Schaffer that put a video out the other year, which Elijah Schaffer, who was just banned on Facebook, as well as Donald Trump and Brandon Strzok, A Walk Away. I believe Tracy Beans was just banned from something. A lot of these people. None of these people, by the way, are talking about violence, yet they're getting struck down. You call that, you say that's not authoritarianism? And what has our government done about it? What has our government done about it? Folks, you need to know your terms. You need to get stronger in your knowledge. We need to be able to debate. We cannot suffer violence. Violence does not do anything. It only begets violence. If we're going to win this, we have to do it by going willingly and peacefully. This is what happened with the civil rights movement in the United States. It's what happened when the British basically gave India its own rule through Gandhi, and it's what happened with Christianity. It is more powerful to be peaceful and allow people to see the evils that they do. You know what happened in the fall of the Soviet Union? People, there were in the military and all throughout the Soviet Union and cities or whatever, thought that there was going to be this big coup, this big battle. And they said, no, enough is enough. Our country has suffered enough for the last 150 years. And they just gave up. They said, I'm not going to do it. There wasn't a shot fired. Ended overnight like that. You know, I think these things are meant to come to pass, but, you know, it may not be. Hey guys, I got all these things going on right here, right? Let's see how soon it'll come up. Well, I got one of them on the end here. I got the Rumbles. I got the Locals channel. Look at this. Look at this. Video directly to Locals. Will it play? Doesn't matter if it plays. I got the Ends Justify the Memes, the live show, which we'll be doing live tomorrow on DLive and YouTube as our friend Kizza GT joins us at 3 p.m. And then I have the Ends Justify the Memes on YouTube, of course. And guys, just go check it out. Go check it out. We're live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and you know, we have fun. It's a little bit looser of a show. It's not driven by articles and stuff, you know. And we like to have guests on. We're going to have Don from Plebeian Media on this Wednesday coming up, and he was at the Capitol building when people were going into it. So we're going to talk to him, and we're going to see how that goes. But folks, with all that, again, know your terms, know what's going on, understand. We fight with our words, ideally. And maybe you think it's good to get violent, but I'm telling you right now, the people that have all the institutional power, they're all on the left. And they're all authoritarians, they're all fascists, they're all corporatists, they're all commies, they're all whatever. They're not people who care about your liberty or your rights in any way, shape, or form. This isn't horseshoe theory, folks. It doesn't loop around. Fascism isn't far right. That is a label that the communists gave to the fascists to basically throw them off the scent of their own horrors and evils. And more people died under communism than ever did under fascist regimes. Neither one of them are right. They're both immoral. But hey, you can pick your poison. I'm going to pick liberty every single time. With all that said, this has been All Minus One, and I wish you all well.